All right, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. May have a few others popping in, but in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Julie Drzezinski. I am the Director of Employer Engagement here in the Center for Career Development at Holy Cross, and I'm really excited to welcome some members from the MGH Cancer Center Protocol team with us today to talk a little bit about their office and kind of what they do, the recruiting cycle, some tips that folks can think about as we kind of consider CRC, CRA type roles. So we have Nikki Murphy, Tyler Hawley, and Megan Hazard. And Megan's also a Holy Cross alum, which is exciting. So you'll be able to hear about her experience. And not too long ago, she was in a lot of your shoes. So to get us started, I'll turn it over here to Tyler. Just a couple of housekeeping things, as this is definitely can be a very kind of interactive session. So as Tyler and Nikki and Megan are chatting, if there's questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll kind of be monitoring the chat and we can kind of answer those questions as we go. And there'll also be time at the end too for some discussion and questions. So feel free, as folks are talking, to ask any questions that might pop up. Tyler.
Great. Thanks, Julie. Let me just get my screen. Is everybody seeing just the one slide there?
Yep.
Great. Thanks. So as Julie said, I'm Tyler Hawley. I'm an associate director with the Cancer Center Protocol Office, which we'll talk about more in just a minute. And I am thrilled that you guys took the time to be with us. Cameron was telling us before you got on that it's the week before spring break. So we know that's a stressful time, but we're grateful to be able to share some about our office and hope that it can be interesting to you and that you can interact with us in terms of how we can be helpful as you all think about next steps after school. So just by way of introduction, I've been with the Cancer Center Protocol Office for about 9 years, and otherwise in cancer research, healthcare management for about 15 total. I was at Dana-Farber prior to this, so have had some experience with operation management over the course of the last 15 years. I help manage a team called the People Organization and Engagement Team, POET for short, and we do what we're getting ready to talk about. We do a lot of the recruitment for our office, and so we have started over the last few years to engage with schools more in this type of activity to try to bridge between students and us and make sure that you all have a clear avenue to engage with us as an organization. We will talk about how valuable you are as new graduates to our organization and how we think we can be really valuable for you going forward as well. Nikki Murphy is also with us. I'll do quick introductions of who's with us, and then each of us will talk at separate times through this. But Nikki's been part of the CCPO for about 4 years. Again, works very closely with our POET team and oversees all recruitment activities. So she'll take over in the second half of this and talk all things recruitment and tips and tricks kind of for you guys as you think about applying for jobs, especially as it relates to us. Megan Hazard, as Julie said, is an alum of Holy Cross. We're thrilled that she took the time to be with us. She's only been with our office for about 6 months. And so it's a really good opportunity for her to share her experience in real life. She's been where you guys were sitting just over a year ago. And so to be able to hear from her, I think is a real treat. And I'm excited that she took the time to be with us. As Julie said, as I go through these slides, you guys feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. We will pause at different times for questions, but I would love it if somebody just came off mute and interrupted me. That's how I prefer these things to happen, because I think it's just a lot more conversational than you guys listening to me talk. With that said, I will sort of continue on with who we are as a group. But again, feel free to interrupt at any point to ask clarifying questions. So we've talked about the Cancer Center Protocol Office. It'd probably be helpful if we define who we are. So we are the office at MGH that manages all oncology clinical trials. I'm making some assumptions about who you guys are and what you're studying, but you may be somewhat familiar with clinical trials. Essentially what happens is the pharmaceutical company or a sponsor reaches out to us and says, we have a drug that we think will be effective in treating X type of cancer. Will you be a site that runs that clinical trial to help prove that it's effective and safe in patients? Once we have that relationship established, we then have, and we're going to look at roles in a minute, we then have many different types of roles in our office that say, yes, we will do that, and we'll do it according to all federal regulations, and we'll do it in a way that promotes the safety of this drug, and if it's effective, that moves towards FDA approval for standard of care. So in order to do that, we needed to partner with a lot of different types of agencies and organizations. The Cancer Center Protocol Office was created in 1994 to be a centralized group to manage all of those relationships. So it's with sponsors, a group like Pfizer, for example. It's managing our institutional review board processes. It's managing our financial processes where we have to put contracts in place to do this. So we have all of that in place underneath the umbrella of the CCPO. that helps then centralize and just provide a lot of services to the MGH Cancer Center. As I've already said, we provide data management and administrative management for mostly therapeutic, but some select non-therapeutic. When I say therapeutic, it means we are providing these medications to patients. So there's an actual therapy involved. Because we're an oncology space, a lot of our patients are very sick and or have kind of run to a place where they don't have a great option for next treatment. And so being a part of a clinical trial is something that they are presented with an opportunity. And I'll just put a note here that a lot of our patients see it as a great kind of duty and honor to be a part of these clinical trials. Many of them will see it as providing future options for patients who may be in their same shoes. And probably all of us here have been impacted by cancer in some way. So the work we do, you don't have to look far to find motivation for the work we do. It is meaningful work that we see real change over the course of time. Our office does promote and facilitate clinical research by providing comprehensive services to physicians that conduct the clinical trials. So the physicians at MGH are not technically part of our office, but we provide support to the work that they do. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we think about hiring practices. We also provide administrative support to a small group of clinical research coordinators called investigator directed. So they work specifically with one physician rather than on a portfolio of studies. And we manage the work that that group does, as well as what's called the core group, Cancer Outcomes Research and Education, which looks at more long-term care of patients who have either had cancer or live with longer-term diagnoses. How do we support those patients? So that's a very brief introduction of who we are. I will pause there. Any questions about things I've said so far? All righty, I'll keep going. This is the rest of my slides are very quick. These are the quote unquote disease groups that we support as part of the MGH CCPO. We have quotes around disease groups really because at least one of these is more of a modality of treatment. So the proton group, which Megan actually will probably talk more about later. And then one is a specific phase of treatment, phase one, rather than specific disease groups. The rest are, as you see, they're listed by types of cancer that patients come to us with. And so we support different groups. Within each of these groups, we have a number of staff who are listed here. These are almost all of the roles that we hire for at the Cancer Center Protocol Office. As part of this discussion today, we're going to focus on the Clinical Research Associate, CRA for short, and the Clinical Research Coordinator role, because those are our entry-level roles that we find students who are probably in your shoes are most interested in when they're applying for these entry-level roles. So those are what we're going to highlight in the next slide. We thought it would be helpful, though, to sort of give you a brief overview of some of the other roles that we have, and I'll talk about specifically the management position and why we wanted to make a point to highlight those. But first, let me cover some of the others. So we do have research nurses as part of our clinical team. We have what are called enrollment monitors who help ensure that patients are safely enrolled in our studies, that they meet all of the criteria that are required of patients to be on a study. We have a team called Regulatory Affairs Coordinator, RAC for short, that does, as you would guess from the title, a lot of the regulatory work. So this is getting the incoming protocol, making sure it's written appropriately for us to run the clinical trial, and then also some of our communication with the Institutional Review Board as we make amendments to protocols and just make sure that we're staying on top of all of the regulations that are required to do that. I mentioned our finance team. They work with contracting and payments, as you would guess. And then we have a couple of specialty teams. One is the Program for Coordination and Oversight of Research Protocols. In order for me not to talk too much, I'm not going to get too in-depth into what those folks do, other than to say they are kind of a mini office within our office that helps run clinical trials at different sites around the country. So if we have an investigator who is at MGH that is the principal investigator for a study and the sponsor, and we run that at, let's say, MD Anderson, our PCOR team helps make sure that they are running it correctly at that site. So that's what they do. And then the clinical research data specialist is a relatively new role for us, frankly, in response to COVID. A lot of our staff went more remote, and so we needed some additional staff to do a lot of our data input for patients that are on clinical trials. So that's largely who makes up our staff. A note about management positions, and specifically as they relate to the CRA and CRC positions. I would say by large measure, the staff that we get applications from the students that we get applications from are students who are looking to either go on to some type of graduate program, but don't know exactly what that is. or they know exactly what they want to do and they need a couple of gap years to get some clinical experience. By and large, those are the people we see apply to our roles. One of the great joys of my career at MGH has been that we've seen, yes, those specific individuals come into the role, but we've also seen people go, you know what, I thought that's what I wanted to do, but in fact, I love the work that's happening here and see a need to be in leadership, and I think I can fill that role. We are serious about developing those people into these roles. And so I just want to make a note about that. If you fall into one of those categories, great. If you don't, we have over the last few years taken very seriously the opportunity to build out programs so that we can promote people into management roles and help them develop into careers that they may not have guessed they wanted to do. So that's why we wanted to keep this slide here, because we thought it was helpful to sort of talk about the overarching goal of us as we hire people and develop them. We want to be able to support sort of all of those realities that I just mentioned.
Tyler, can I ask a quick question related to that?
Yes, please.
So what's the typical, like if you were going to stay and kind of go on from a CRA, CRC role into more management, what's that typical progression look like?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Julie. So typically we hire staff into what are called one positions, so CRA1 or CRC1 positions, and we have a pretty clear kind of path to development. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then you can get into what we call an associate project manager role. I would say in terms of timing, it obviously depends on the individual, but usually 2 to 3 years is sort of the way you work through that program. And like most promotions, each of those promotions brings different levels of independence and responsibility. And so we are usually pretty clear with staff that we want to promote them from a CRA or CRC1 to a 2 kind of as quickly as possible and as quickly as it makes sense for their independence in the role, because we do want to develop people. Does that answer the question, Julie? Great, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
So now kind of zeroing in on those 2 roles that are really our most popular entry-level roles, the clinical research associate and the clinical research coordinator roles. I'm actually going to start with the CRC, which is the second one on the slide here. This is the one that if students say, I know I want to be a clinician at some point in my career, I need to have some clinical experience for either PA school, NP school, to go to medical school to be an MD, this is the one that fits in that category the most cleanly. So it is similar to a medical assistant role where we train staff to do EKGs, vital signs. There's regular patient interaction. Your desk would actually be in the patient with, or in the clinic with patients. Work closely with physicians, research nurses. So it is a clinical environment by every definition of the term in the true CRC role. I typically will say to our staff, the CRC role is like a medical assistant, but on steroids. And the on steroids part of that is that it all is underneath the umbrella of research. So it's not just that a patient is coming in and saying, hey, I'm here for what we would call regular cancer care. So an MA would do vital signs, EKGs, that sort of thing. It's that the patient is here because they're following a strict plan called a protocol, and we have to follow it to the letter of the law, or we have to give definition of why we didn't follow it. And you as a CRC, if you're in this position, would be responsible for scheduling all of those appointments exactly according to the protocol. So that's the CRC position. Again, happy to take questions about it. I'll keep talking about the CRA position. Again, please feel free to interrupt me if necessary. A CRA position is more on the data management side of the equation for our office. So once a study is activated, and that means that we've received the protocol from the sponsor. We've said, yes, we can run this at our site. We've agreed to all of the stipulations that are in the protocol. That study then gets activated, and we're able to start accruing patients to the study. Once that happens, the CRA is the point person for the trial. So you have communication with the sponsor. Again, oftentimes it's a large pharmaceutical company or a small one, but a pharmaceutical company. You are the point person for communication with the IRB. You have regular meetings with investigators, physicians, your manager. All of the information sort of comes back to the CRA. And the way that that works for us is usually through the medical record. We use an electronic medical record. A CRA is sort of doing data mining in the medical record to go, okay, we met the criteria for this visit. These are the things I need to report out to the sponsor using the data capture form that the sponsors have given us. Our CRAs register the subjects to the trial, and then they follow them as long as they're on our trial. I just mentioned this, but they submit the data to the sponsor. And this bucket of complete regulatory work, that's a large bucket of amendments, things like that, that happen over the life of the study that's with us. we are becoming more specialized in some of our roles. So that regulatory work happens with our regulatory affairs team sometimes as well. But the CRA, again, is really the point person for specific patients on a trial and then amendments that may come for that specific trial. So let me just pause there and take questions. I have just one more quick thing to say about each of these roles, but I want to give students or anybody else an opportunity to ask questions. And Nikki and Megan, feel free to jump in if I needed clarification on any of that stuff.
I just had a quick question. So
Yeah.
in terms of like patient interaction, would you say that the CRA is something that you see a lot less of that, or are you also kind of working with patients and their families
Yeah.
like in that position as well?
Thanks, Grace, for asking the question. I love that you kind of broke the seal of students asking questions. I would say that you see a lot less patient interaction in the true form of the word patient interaction. So you are not standing in the clinic with patients. You're not having phone calls with the patients. There is no face-to-face interaction. However, because you are doing a lot of the electronic medical record sort of pulling of data, it is as if you get to know that patient very well because you're seeing all of their data on a very regular basis. And so it's kind of a weird relationship, honestly, because you're going, okay, I know a lot about patient Tyler Holly. I've never met them in person. I'm not standing in front of them. So it's a unique experience. And if you're truly looking for the experience of standing in front of a patient, talking with them, touching them for medical assessments, that's the CRC position. And that actually takes me into what I was going to say about these positions. In terms of cyclical turnover, and Nikki's going to get to this in a minute too, but typically with CRC, we see that focus of I really need the patient interaction or want the patient interaction, but I know I'm going to be applying to school in the next few cycles, right? And so we'll see staff in that position. We would love it to be a full 2 years. Frankly, we are at this point thrilled if it's a year to 2 years if we get folks in that position, because what we find is that some of our most successful staff members are also the ones who get into school somewhat quickly, right? And so they're moving on pretty quickly, but we have found that we're okay with that because we can train these CRC staff fairly quickly and get them up and running where it's a meaningful experience, both for you guys and for us as an office. The CRA position, we actually, when we interview for that, we ask staff to give a 2-year commitment. Now, it's a soft commitment. We don't have signed contracts, but when staff are coming on, we say, can you commit to up to 2 years for this position? Because the onboarding for that CRA work takes a lot longer. And so to make it more of a meaningful experience for everybody, it's sort of a longer runway to get into the position. And so again, then it makes sense that we would ask people to stay in that position a little longer. So that's my spiel. Go ahead, Grace. I saw you come off mute.
I was just going to say thank you. That was
okay,
a very cohesive answer, so thank you.
Yep, sure. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Nikki, who's going to sort of have an interaction with Megan about. Oh yeah, please.
I had a quick question regarding the CIA role. You talked about the data management portion. Is there any specific programs that are like specific to MGH that would be like valuable to learn, or is it specific to the pharmaceutical companies that they interact with when running point with them?
Yeah, great question. So you've kind of answered the question when you asked it. It's a bit of a both and. So it is very unique to the pharmaceutical companies. They each will say, here's our data capture system that they're fairly easy to learn, frankly, Ronan. But then also I would say RedCap is a program that we use at MGH that's pretty popular and one would be helpful if people had experience on. Nikki's going to talk about actually some of the things we look for in candidates that apply to our positions. A bit of a spoiler alert that we actually, because they're entry-level positions, we assume you don't have a lot of experience, right? And that's okay. Like we know that that's part of the deal when we're interviewing entry-level positions. So it would be helpful to have had some experience with data capture systems, but we understand that that may not be possible given that you're applying for your first job out of college.
Thank you.
Yep. So with that, I will turn it over to Nikki, who's going to sort of introduce Megan and have a conversation with her and interaction about her own experience. And then again, Nikki will sort of come back to the recruitment piece of this. So go ahead, Nikki.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I definitely am excited to introduce Megan. She's in a unique role. She is a dual role. So she does both our CRA and our CRC. And you did not, I don't believe it was on our slide of listed roles because, like I said, it is unique and currently right now it is only within the proton group. So she's perfect to kind of share her story here because she's got experience in both areas. So Megan, thank you again for being part of this. So we're really excited, but we would love, Megan, if you'd be able to tell us a little bit about your story, kind of who you are and how you came to apply to this position.
Hi, everybody. So as Nikki said, I'm Megan. I graduated from Holy Cross last year, so class of 2023. I am a CRA, CRC 2 actually now, not 1. So as Tyler said, that was a pretty quick transition for me, only after 6 months. And I am in the proton group, specifically working with GI radiation oncology trials, which has been a very unique experience for me. It's something I never thought I was going to work with. So it's been a really great learning experience. But yeah, last year around this time, I started applying for jobs, mainly CRC roles, because I knew I wanted to be patient facing. And I was only really applying to psychology-based roles as well. I was a psychology major and have always been interested in pursuing that field. But as I was, I'm sure a lot of you are seniors, and at this point in time, you're getting very stressed. And I would like to tell you not to be stressed, but I know that's kind of hard to say. But I had a roommate at Holy Cross whose sister was in this position a couple of years ago, and she was the one who kind of introduced me to this role. And I loved the idea of this dual CRA, CRC kind of position, because you get to see the patient in so many different aspects, and you don't necessarily have to worry about the difference between the two roles. I actually didn't know some of those differences on the previous slide. I kind of just assumed some of them were CRC instead of CRA. But yeah, I think oncology was something, if you told me last year I was going to be working in oncology, I wouldn't have believed you. And now at this point, I don't know where else I could ever end up. It has been truly a life-changing kind of position to be in, and one that I hope to pursue.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Megan, since you've been here, and as you did share, thinking about moving forward, how has, being in your position now, how's that helping you with your goals moving forward?
Yeah, so I want to apply to nurse practitioning schools in the future, and the position I'm in has been really amazing in making connections with so many different types of providers. I work with so many different doctors and nurse practitioners, as well as RNs. And all of them are just so encouraging in, developing your career and developing what you want to be as a person in the healthcare field. And with that, so many of them want you to come to them with questions and want you to go to them for shadowing opportunities, which is a really unique experience, especially for somebody right out of college. So I think it's been really great. I've been hearing so many different perspectives too that have made me kind of shift about what exactly I want to do in the future too. Like I said, I've always wanted to do psychology. And with that, I've always thought abnormal psychology. But as you see in these roles, cancer patients need psychology help too. This is such a really tough time for them. And it's not just about treating them physically, it's about treating them in all different aspects. It's just why oncology is so cool. It's so interdisciplinary. And I've been seeing where my future goals could fit in that world and see how all of my new loves for oncology and psychology have been kind of meshing, which I think is amazing. And all of these amazing physicians and other roles too, even like my goodness, my managers, excuse me, and administration have been great too with helping me build steps into what I want to do in the future.
Great. Thank you, Megan. And I know that you and I, in our previous conversations, when we were talking a little bit, you even mentioned that you have the opportunity to even connect with people outside your direct management or leadership, and are able to kind of pick their brains on, whether it's, other doctors and that could be, as you're thinking about, like you said, your goals moving forward. So, if that's something that, you're able to share a little bit more about, or how you have access to that, or how you just interact with a variety of people.
Yeah, so like I said, my clinic is very interdisciplinary. We have a staff of psychologists that are specific for oncology patients. And we also have an amazing team of social workers. And you get referrals for patients for some of these teams, and you start to make the connections of, oh, I know this is the person I contact for this specific disease group. This job seems really cool. And you just reach out and you say, hey, do you mind if I just pick your brain for a little bit? Like, your job seems really cool to me. I know we've exchanged emails a couple of times, but so that's just really cool too. You don't necessarily get to see the list of people that are in each department unless you're actively looking for who to contact. So now I have the list of, those psychology oncologists and these social workers that have been just so amazing with my patient care that I'm like, well, let's talk more. Like, what else do you do? Like, what else can I learn from you? And it's not just for psychology too. We also have a really amazing team of nutritionists. If anybody's ever interested in that, they are absolutely wonderful and care so much about these patients. And they also are a really cool group to pick their brains a little bit. And then with other doctors and stuff, I work mainly with radiation oncologists, but we also do have a great team of medicine oncologists and surgical oncologists that I'll work with sometimes. And those physicians as well are just so encouraging of you just reaching out and saying, hi, how are you? What do you do for a living? And how can I learn more from you?
Megan, I think that's great. And I just want to make a point of, adding on to that real quick is you took the initiative and you continue to do that to just reach out to people and who can I get to know or who can I pick their brains? And we really encourage that. And so does our staff, our doctors, our nurses, they really welcome that. So thank you for sharing that. Do you have, Megan, is there anything else, any tips, any recommendations that you would have for, the students here or any questions that they'd have for you? Please, I want to open it up to that.
I would just say my biggest tip is to not pigeonhole yourself into what you're looking for next year or 2 years or 3 years, depending on what year you are. Like I said, I didn't originally look into oncology roles, and as time went on and there were more and more jobs coming out that I was, not sure I'd be interested in. I didn't know anything about cancer before starting this role. But again, it's been such an amazing experience that if I had pigeonholed myself and said, I'm only going to apply to jobs that are specific to psych research, I never would have been here and I never would have been growing as a person in healthcare. So I would say just keep an open mind. Don't get as stressed as I know a lot of you will be. You'll get a job. I didn't have a job until after I graduated. So graduation came around and I was stressed. I was, far behind a lot of my peers and friends who had had jobs for months, and it'll come. You'll have a job. It's okay. Just keep putting yourself out there. I'd say that too. Put yourself out there. If you like the idea of a job that you see on LinkedIn or the MGH career website, and you think this would be a really cool opportunity, reach out to people, find the contacts that are linked to those jobs, and just keep reaching out.
Thanks, Megan. Does anyone have any questions for Megan right now? Or if not, we can move on. And as you think of questions, please drop them in the chat. And yeah, but I'd love to just kind of give you guys a little bit of insight into our recruitment process at the CCPO. So as Tyler mentioned, our department is divided into those different disease groups. So what we've developed over the last several years is a centralized recruitment process that works together with all of those, disease groups across our department. And I'm not sure if Tyler had mentioned this earlier, but the size of the CCPO is roughly around 450, I believe. So, so you can think about that when you think back to that slide in terms of the managers, the research nurses, the enrollment monitors, CRAs, CRCs, and all the various roles. So what our team does, and we are a team of 3 that also work as part of our POET team as well. But what we do is we work very closely with all the hiring managers across the department on identifying open positions that need to be posted. We get those positions posted and we help to recruit and staff for those. one thing to mention that Megan, just to kind of go off what she just said, look on the MGH job board. One thing you'll notice about our roles is that if we have a position posted, you will always see after it, Cancer Center Protocol Office. That means that that is a role that we are specifically staffing for that falls under our department. And that is going to fall under myself and two other of our team members, Renee and Isa. So like I said, what we do is we post those positions. We look for applicants that we want to reach out to, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But when you think about, if you see a posting, I just want to kind of point this out as well. We might have a posting for CRA, and there could be 10 openings for that across multiple disease groups. It may not list that specifically in our posting. And then just quite the opposite. We could have another very specific job posting where we only have one opening. So keep that in mind as you're looking at it. It's not the number of postings that you see, but the general posting itself. And what we do internally is we work with our different disease groups, our hiring managers, in terms of what their needs are. And as we're talking to candidates, we're figuring out, okay, they may be perfect fit for this team, knowing, the dynamics of the team, what type of person they're looking for. It may be too that you have a specific interest, and we're on a phone call with you and we're going to say, okay, we have 5 openings for CRAs and these different disease groups. A lot of times we try to connect and line up with someone that has a preference. Sometimes we're not able to. Sometimes it is priority based, but just so you have an idea of how we post those positions and kind of what's going on behind the scenes. But once we do identify, which candidates in terms of in the requisition that we want to reach out to, and that is, looking at their resume, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But we will reach out to, and our first step is we're going to ask for a phone screen. And we have, just a brief questions that are our initial point of contact with you. Some of that is looking, what's your availability timeline, as Tyler mentioned, as he talked about the CRA and CRC roles. There's a difference in terms of, what we're looking for availability. We want to get to know career goals, things like that. So, and I'll go a little bit deeper into that too, and want to open it up for questions as well in terms of what to expect for that first initial contact. But following a phone screen, what we also do within recruitment is we see this process all the way through until we actually make the offer. So, if the phone call goes great, we're like, this is a, potential fit, we're going to send you on to a hiring manager. They're going to review your information and they're going to make a decision. Yes, this looks great. I'd like to interview this person. So our recruitment team continues to be that point of contact, scheduling the interviews, coordinating with, each person's schedules. Typically, and I'll go into a little bit more about what those interviews look like and who you'd be meeting with, but following an interview, there's different steps. That goes well, we go into references, things like that. But what we have developed within our centralized recruitment process is just a continuous point of contact all the way through to, if we get to the point where we're making that offer. And then what we do is we work very closely with our education manager and making sure that you're onboarding, there's a smooth transition to being hired and, starting, and making sure that you have those trainings in place and everything like that. So, but what I would like to do too, and Tyler, you can go on to the next, unless somebody has any questions about that, please jump in. But I did want to just touch on resumes, because that is the first thing that we look at. So if I open a job requisition, for a clinical research associate, CRC, whatever that may be, I have hundreds of resumes that I'm looking through. So I just want to provide each of you just a little bit of a, kind of inside our brains and how we operate in terms of what stands out. For us, for our team, really the first thing is that visually, your resume is appealing. And when I mean appealing, it's clean cut, it's organized, it's easy to just kind of peruse the document versus something that's really jumbled together and, it's all over the place, or there's things packed in there. So again, it sometimes less is more. But the next thing too is we really hone in, okay, what are those important pieces of information that we need to verify? Obviously, first of all, education, because all of our roles do require a minimum of a bachelor's degree. So we're checking that, and then we're looking at, relevant experience. And, as we've mentioned earlier on this meeting, that a lot of you are coming with not experience, and that's okay. Our roles are equipped, and set up in a way that we provide that training that you need. However, if you're, during your college years, you've been involved with different, research related activities, and it clearly shows you have a history of interest in those things. I do look at those. I think that's great. Your participation in multiple things, sports, clubs, really shows that team connection, that, leadership activities, things like that. So even though you may be coming from college and might not have postgraduate experience, we still look at, okay, what have they been doing? What have they been involved in? Otherwise, once we do take, I would say our next closer look, as I've kind of, okay, now we're going to hone in a little bit more. And, I start to look at, for those that have years of employment, are there gaps in employment? I need to understand what that looks like, because those are, what our hiring managers are concerned about. Again, not so much during, undergraduate years, but, what have you been involved in during those years as well? And then another big thing, and it's big for a lot of our hiring managers too, is, when you're putting your resume together, double, triple check that, make sure grammatically it's correct, it's consistent, because we do have hiring managers that will look and that will, if you think about, our roles require somebody that has very good attention to detail. So we are going to look into that document as well with that, attention to detail too. So, but any questions, I want to open it up to so far what I've said. Please jump in, ask anything you'd like. Okay.
Nikki, before I move on, I'll just kind of reiterate a couple things. One is that if Nikki had been looking at my resume for grammatical correctness, I probably wouldn't have been hired. But also a couple things I was thinking as Nikki was talking. So she's mentioned hiring manager and recruitment team a couple of times. And I think this is something for you guys to be aware of, not just for our office, but as you think about applying to roles. Many organizations will have a recruitment hiring team that is not the group you will work closely with when you are hired.
Yep.
And so as you're considering a job for yourself and somebody says, we're going to get you in touch with a hiring manager, it is probably worth you asking the question, will that be my direct manager when I start the position? Because we know that interviews for you are just like for us. They're a time to get to know each other. And so we want you to have the full information. For us specifically, we'll try to be clear about that and say, we're putting you in touch with a hiring manager who would be the manager for this role. I don't know what other organizations do. And I don't know if they're as clear as we try to be. And so just as a sort of general applying to jobs thing to keep a lookout for, many of your point people, so to speak, in the application process may not be your direct manager. So just clarify that as you go through the process.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Nikki.
Yes.
With you mentioned the teamwork and the attention to details, kind of like transferable skills
Mhm.
for some of our students that maybe don't have either the clinical or the research experience. What are some of the other pieces that do help to stand out and are kind of like keys for the CRC and the CRA roles that we should be highlighting?
Right. So I know that some of the top skills in terms of what our managers emphasize is organization too. These roles require a very high level of organization. So that's, and those are things that during interviews, and I can talk a little bit more about that too. Our managers are going to kind of gear some of their question towards, how do you prioritize tasks? How do you, how do you, organize your things, what documents, things like that. So
And Cameron, I'll jump in and so a couple of notes about that is Nikki referenced, we look at hundreds of resumes, and really Nikki and her team do. I don't anymore, but it's a real challenge to look at a resume and go, okay, that thing sticks out to us, right? And so, as you all have heard repeatedly, and I know it can be frustrating here, relationships and connections really do matter. And so, Megan, I might put you on the spot in a minute to say, do you feel like was there anything on your resume that stood out? But oftentimes, if the resume is well organized, clean, we can make sense of it, that person will move to a phone screen. And then the phone screen is really the time for you guys to set yourselves apart and say, this is why I'm interested in the role. This is why I think I could be a good fit for this role. This is what I've done that makes me feel like I am capable of doing the things that you're going to ask me to do. Right. And so if we can get a conversation as a phone screen that we go, okay, we can put the pieces together of the resume where you're looking at a whole person when we're talking to them on the phone. That's the time to really, and I know it's hard because you're going, well, how do I get the phone screen? Right. And I think, again, I'll just be frank with you guys that it is hard to put the exact magical thing on your resume that says that's what we're going to pick it out of the pile for. And so that's why I'm curious, Megan, do you feel like there was something on your resume that just hit the sweet spot for us? I know that's kind of a question for us too, but I'm curious what you would say to that question.
I definitely think I was really lucky. I was able to get my EMT certification back in my junior year, and that opened up a lot of doors. So I was able to become a nursing assistant for the summer between my junior and senior year. I worked heavily with the athletic training office at Holy Cross, and I did do research for one semester with Professor Schmidt in the psychology department. But I would say that, again, that was really lucky. There's not a lot of clinical, experience to be out there without having your degree yet. So if you can find ways like that to get like your CPR certifications, your EMT certifications, which I know is a pretty heavy ask. But again, like that was lucky. And that only happened my last 2 years of school. Freshman and sophomore year, I had nothing that would have fit on my resume. So I would say highlighting, like Nikki said, your organizational skills, your multitasking skills, you're jumping from so many different studies and so many different aspects of these studies that you have to be able to say, oh, I need to do this and I need to do something completely different in a completely different study all in one day and be able to do it. So again, I was lucky. But finding different roles that if you were in Best Buddies, pull like how you were able to make relationships and connections with people, like really find something that was in your clubs and stuff like that you can highlight that would transition into clinical work. Clinical work and is so people-based that there's something that in all of your experiences that you could highlight.
Thank you, Megan. That was great.
absolutely.
And Nikki and Tyler, I do see there's a question in the chat for Mary Kate. What are some tips and recommendations for a CV? So like thinking about a CV versus a resume. Love to hear about that.
So the short answer is we actually only require resumes to be submitted as part of the application process for MGH. And so in my experience, at least when I get a CV, it is frankly hard to digest sometimes because it's just going to have a lot more information on it typically. So if somebody's having all of the research that they've ever worked on or something like that, it's a lot of that, what we would call research for some students is wet lab research. Those are not the positions we're hiring for, right? And so it's not actually applicable to our roles for somebody to have done wet lab research, other than it gives you some language around how to understand research. And that's valuable, right? So I'm not saying it's not valuable. It's just not completely pertinent to our roles for our group. There's plenty of wet labs and MGH that are hiring positions all the time, right? And so if that's your interest, there are opportunities for that. But for our roles, it's really saying, okay, they understand research to an extent. We know we're going to have to teach that. But I will go back to what Nikki said, because of the volume of resumes we get, a concise, well-organized resume is a wonderful gift to our recruitment team. And so, Mary Kate, I know that's maybe not the answer you're looking for, but that's really, in terms of our real life lived experience in our office, that's the advice I would give.
Yeah. When we are in the height of what we refer to as research season, and we have like Tyler said, hundreds and hundreds of resumes that we are just trying to go through in a timely way too, because once we have somebody apply, we want to respond as quick as we can, you know, in terms, so a lot of times it's timing. We have time to pull up a cover letter and look through that, and sometimes there isn't. So really, it's our go-to, our immediate first thing is the resume. So hopefully that helps. So like I said, okay, once we
Sorry,
are,
Nikki, I just saw one more in the chat that I could try to address real quick.
okay, go ahead.
Brenna asked, can you go over what makes a good cover letter? This is a sort of a loaded question too, because even within our recruitment team, some people give more weight to a cover letter than others. And it goes back to, Brenna, what we were talking about just our capacity to read all of the documents that might be submitted with a resume, with an application. MGH, I think this is correct, Nikki, doesn't require a cover letter when you're doing the application through the job posting website for MGH. However, to answer your question of what makes a good cover letter, some of the things I was just talking about, right, in terms of we want to see that we are hiring whole people, not robots. We have no interest in hiring robots, right? So we want to see what Megan was talking about. How did some of the other things you've done at school or outside of school, how do those play into your interest in this position? And the one thing I would say is please, please, please make a cover letter specific to a job. So we have gotten cover letters before that says, I'm interested in working at Dana-Farber because, and we're like, well, we're glad you're interested in Dana-Farber, but that's not what we're hiring for, right? And so somebody just makes a generic cover letter and they blast it out. So that matters. And we notice those types of things. And so make it personal to you as a complete person, make it individual to the role you're applying for. And you can have 3 paragraphs that are pretty generic, but if you have one paragraph that says, here's why I'm interested in the MGH posting for this position, that will catch our eye a lot. And so those are sort of the top things I would say is personal to you, personal to the role, and then a quick overview of how you are gifted in a way that others might not be to do the role you're applying for.
I think another thing
Cut you off,
too
Nikki,
is-
I just saw.
oh, sorry. When someone is making a complete career shift is when I'll sit and I'll question, why are they applying to this? So that's when I will actually go looking for a cover letter. Is there an explanation, a little bit more insight that I can understand what brings them to apply to this position? So sometimes that's an appropriate time as well, so. I'll keep going, but please, yeah, interrupt, jump in whenever, but just like Tyler said, in terms of our phone screens, once we have kind of gone through and pulled some resumes out of our job requisitions, said, okay, these are the people I want to reach out to, we will reach out via email and we will ask to schedule a phone call. And that is, you know, a brief phone call. I would say roughly these are 20, 30 minutes maybe, but our main goal is we want to get to know you a little bit. Like, again, this is not robotic. This is not a check. I'll tell you, we have had people where they're definitely reading from a script. That's not what we're looking for. You know, we want to get to know, who are you? What draws you to apply to this position? You know, what are your career goals? You know, what is it that you're looking to do? Are you looking to go to med school? You know, what does that look like, you know, 2-5 years down the road? Which position are you most interested in? I can't tell you how often we get people that will apply to a CRC, but really they want a CRA. And that's okay, because it works great in our office because, again, we are centralized. So we have knowledge of all of our, you know, needs across the whole department. So what my team and Tyler's, what we're looking to do is we're looking to get to know you personally. What are you specifically interested in? Because our goal is to match you up with the right team, the right position, and make sure it's a good fit across the board. We don't want to just send you along and, oh, okay, yep, that's just going to fill an opening. We really want to know who you are, what your goals are. We want to support that too. So, you know, another thing is, you know, what sets you apart from other candidates? What, you know, what makes you different? We look to understand that too. So, but what you could expect, you know, once you have a conversation with one of our team members is, you know what, this is great, I'm gonna send them on to, you know, melanoma or whatever team. Those hiring managers of that disease team will then make a decision. Okay, they'll review the resume, they'll review our phone screen notes, and they will decide, yep, I'd like to interview this person. Or I'd rather not. But once they do, like I said earlier, we will be that point person to you as an applicant the entire way through. We will help coordinate the interview, you know, and who are you interviewing with? That is when you are interviewing with the direct manager for that position. You're usually interviewing with at least 2 managers. Depending on the role, depending on the team, you may be interviewing with some research nurses. You may be interviewing with other, you know, peer CRCs or CRAs. So that it can vary depending upon the team. CRCs tend to interview a little bit more with the research team, and Tyler, feel free to jump in if you want, but you know, the research nurses, a couple of the CRCs. So our investigator directed CRC positions, that is when you will actually meet with the acting PI, the doc that's overseeing that study. So that's a little different as well. So as far as how to prepare for those interviews, again, you know, kind of come prepared knowing, you know, why are you interested in this? We have a lot of managers that are looking to, you know, bring people on board that have a genuine interest in research. You know, what does that look like? Where do your interests lie? You know, yes, you're meeting on Zoom, but please still present yourself professionally, dress professionally. That still matters to our hiring managers for sure. You know, they're looking for people that can communicate well. You know, you're going to be in a position where you're communicating with a wide variety of people. You know, Tyler, please jump in because Tyler has interviewed many, many, many CRCs. So, but again, you know, that's your opportunity to kind of share who you are. And following an interview, you know, there may be different stages too. What we try to do is coordinate them as together as possible. So usually we're doing back-to-back, you know, manager meetings for, you know, an applicant. And then you might have a second follow-up round. You know, but following that interview, then it's the decision of, okay, yes, that was great. I'd like to move forward with references. You know, again, our recruitment team coordinates that. We request the references. So, but I did want to put in here just some suggestions as well, you know, after your interview. You know, please feel free to send an email. Obviously, that email would come to our recruitment team, but we would make sure that it gets to our hiring managers. And it could just be like, thank you for your time. You know, maybe it's a, you know, a post genuine interest in what you've talked about, things like that. The other thing too, your response time to, if we follow up with you and go, hey, the team really, they love meeting with you, think you would be a great fit. We'd love to move forward with references, or this is going to be the next step in the stage. You know, your response time and helping us keep moving that along is important too. So I do, you know, recommend keeping an eye on that too. But I will
Nikki,
pause.
I'll add a couple of quick things. I know we're running on time, so I'll be aware of that. But just a couple of things to note. I will reiterate that it matters that you guys find a quiet spot for these meetings, that it is clear that you've taken time to prepare. I have been on phone screens where it's clear that the person is like walking through the dining hall and saying hello to all of their friends. And I'm on the phone going, okay, we can probably cut this one kind of short. Because what that demonstrates to me, and Megan referenced this earlier, it demonstrates that somebody can take the initiative to find a spot to do this because it matters to them, right? And so we probably could have seen in Megan's interview that she was going to take initiative to meet with people outside of her exact group to find out more information about what a psychologist does in MGH, right? Like those are the things that begin to become fairly obvious to people who do what we do pretty quickly. And so find a quiet spot for the phone screen, find a quiet spot for the Zoom. And I understand that can be difficult when many of you are like, people are on top of us all the time. And so it just prepare for that. The preparation does come through. The other thing I'll quickly talk about is, for us, once you've gotten to a phone screen, and Nikki, correct me if I'm wrong, from phone screen to final offer is roughly 2 to 3 weeks. Just to give you guys an idea of timing in kind of a real life scenario, we'll do the phone screen, set up an interview, have references checked, then we'll get to an offer. And that takes anywhere between 2 and 3 weeks. And then start date can be whenever, which takes me to my next point of, if you guys are seniors, and I know some of you may not be, I would say you can begin applying to these positions now. We have cycles of roughly year to 2 year around this time of year when we start knowing of people leaving, going on to school, or going on to different opportunities. And we're trying to get jobs in place for spring, summer, even into the summer. And that usually is the same year after year after year, where it's, okay, spring's coming, we have summer openings that we know about, we're trying to hire for those. To Megan's point, sometimes we'll hire people in March, sometimes we won't hire people until June. But we can have a start date out into the future so that you guys could know, oh, I have a position for when I graduate. I think that was it. So I'll stop, and I want to leave some time for questions. I know we're close to the time. Julie, Cam, anything that you feel like we should highlight or cover that we didn't talk about?
I think you covered a lot of it. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything that you hadn't touched upon.
I heard the kind of succinct resumes. Any need for more than one page?
If it fits on one page, great.
Yeah, one page is, I would say, generally the standard we would hope for, frankly.
Great. And then with the phone screen piece, I know a lot of times when it is the recruitment conversation, how in depth do folks need to be for some of those positions that are, it could be one of 7 different kind of openings on different teams? How focused and how much research do they need to do on kind of which team, or is it more kind of a general fit piece at that stage?
It's really more of just more on our end, kind of knowing what our priority of staffing is with the different teams, and this person would really line up well with this team. Or like I said, if they have a specific interest and we happen to have openings, and priority isn't that much important, we try to cater to that as much as we can. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. But their knowledge of the disease teams isn't expected.
Right.
Yeah, and Cameron, I would say when we do a phone screening, the candidates won't have any idea about those disease teams. And so we certainly don't expect them to, because there's no way they would. So it's really a general fit to your question.
But when they're meeting with the hiring manager with that team, then that would be with the specific disease team, where they'd be ready, hopefully, to talk a little bit about why that interests them, right?
That's right. And I would say generally the way to do that would be just to go to the MGH website and say, okay, I'm interviewing with the breast oncology team. I'm going to at least familiarize myself with who these people might be, what work they support. We are not looking, though, for an in-depth knowledge of each individual protocol we do. There's no way that a candidate would know that. It's more of a general understanding of, okay, I'm meeting with thoracic versus breast oncology. Here's why that matters. Or maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe somebody's open to any of them, right? And just being able to communicate that is really helpful.
And we would let them know where, what team they'd be meeting with. And so they would know ahead of time what that, disease group would be.
And then my last question that I know has come up a little bit, references, typically 3. And then is there a preference in mix of faculty, supervisors, PIs from previous experience? What is best from your perspectives?
Sure. So our HR department requires 4. And again, it does get hard, with students that are, in the undergraduate degree, they've got professors, or, if they're working a job, having a supervisor or a manager as part of that. Maybe it's a coach if they're part of a team, things like that, just to try to vary who those are.
And I will say a plug about that it's difficult for you students to control, but be aware of who you're asking to be your references. So I'll use Cameron as an example. Let's say Cameron is the busiest person you guys know, and he's a little bit flighty, and he'll agree to it, but he won't get to it for 2 months. Don't ask him to be a reference. That actually is a really difficult thing for us then to go, hey, Carrie, you've asked Cameron to be a reference. We haven't heard from him yet. And so it does matter when you're asking to sort of say, okay, I know this person, would give me a great reference, but they also are going to do it quickly. And so it kind of keeps your thing moving along. And again, I know that's somewhat out of your control, but it's just a note to stay on top of those people that you talk to. I'm sure Cameron is not flighty, but since he was in the middle of my screen, I used it as an example.
I've seen most of these very one-page succinct resumes from the folks that joined us today, so I will happily serve as a reference for any of them. And we do offer in our office, beyond help with the cover letter and resumes, we do have a space you can reserve for these phone screenings and Zoom interviews. So
Awesome.
please, as a plug, to come see us as well, especially if you're applying to these positions that kind of got highlighted today from Tyler and Nicole and Megan.
And please,
And I'll also say a plug about our email address. If you all are applying for jobs through the MGH job board, go ahead and apply. Feel free to send an email to this list or this email address we have listed and say, hey, we heard you guys speak at the Holy Cross event. We've applied for this position. It is that's meaningful. That does matter. It will give us a point of reference and sort of give you at least a connection point, right? That we go, oh yeah, we saw that face on the screen. That's really helpful to us.
yeah, please do, because this isn't a general huge mailbox. There's about 5 of us. Tyler and I are on it, and then 2 other of our recruitment team and our education manager. So really it's a close knit team. So we do look at it, and please feel free to reference that, you know, we were on here together. I love it. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nikki, Tyler, Megan. This was incredibly helpful. We appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today and to share a little bit more about CCPO.
thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you.